I am sitting in my small apartment, staring at my phone as it buzzes with an unknown number. My heart sinks when I recognize the area code. It is the same one from my hometown, the place I left behind 5 years ago. The caller ID shows nothing, but somehow I know exactly who this is. Marcus, my younger brother, the golden child who destroyed my life and convinced our parents to disown me. Now, after years of silence, he is calling me. My hands shake slightly, as I wonder what could possibly make him reach out after all this time. The irony is not lost on me that the person who ruined everything might need something from me now. Before we dive into this story, I would love to know where you are watching from. Drop your location in the comments below, and do not forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life stories. Trust me, you will want to stay until the end to see how this twisted family drama finally comes full circle. Looking back 7 years ago, I can still picture myself at 25, working at a small marketing firm downtown, coming home to my girlfriend Jessica every evening, and living just 30 minutes away from my childhood home. Life was not perfect, but it was mine, and I was building something real. Every Sunday, I would drive over to have dinner with my parents, David and Linda, in the same house where Marcus and I grew up. Marcus was 3 years younger than me, but he had always been the star of our family. While I was the responsible older brother who got decent grades and worked hard, Marcus was the one who seemed to effortlessly excel at everything. He graduated summa cum laude from Northwestern University with a finance degree, landed a prestigious job at a downtown investment bank, and had our parents bragging about him to every neighbor who would listen. At family gatherings, conversations always seemed to revolve around Marcus and his latest achievements. I loved my brother, but I would be lying if I said the constant comparisons did not sting. When I told my parents about a promotion at work, Dad would respond with something like, "That is great, Cooper, but did you hear Marcus just closed another $1 million deal?" When I brought Jessica to family dinners, Mom would mention how Marcus was dating this brilliant lawyer who went to Harvard. It was subtle, but the message was clear: I was always going to be second best. What my parents did not see was the side of Marcus that I was beginning to notice. He lived in an expensive downtown loft that seemed way beyond what even his good salary could afford. He drove a brand new BMW, wore designer clothes, and always picked up the tab when we went out to eat, even though I protested. When I asked him about it, he would just smile and say he was good with investments. The first red flag came when Marcus approached me about borrowing some money. He said he had a sure thing investment opportunity and needed $5,000 to get in on it. He promised he would double my money within 3 months. I was hesitant, but he was my brother, and he seemed so confident. Plus, our parents always talked about how smart he was with money, so I figured he knew what he was doing. I withdrew the money from my savings account and handed it over, expecting to see $10,000 by Christmas. Christmas came and went, and when I asked Marcus about the investment, he said there had been some delays, but that everything was still on track. He asked for a little more time, and I gave it to him. Looking back now, I can see how naive I was, but at the time I just wanted to believe my little brother was as successful as everyone thought he was. The phone call that changed everything came on a Tuesday morning in February. I was getting ready for work when my phone rang, and I saw it was First National Bank. I figured it was just a routine call about my checking account, but when I answered, the woman on the other end asked if I was Cooper Williams and if I was calling about my loan application. My blood went cold. I told her there must be some mistake because I had never applied for any loan. She put me on hold for several minutes, and when she came back, her voice had changed completely. She informed me that someone had used my social security number and personal information to apply for a $50,000 personal loan, and it had been approved and dispersed 3 weeks earlier. I felt like the ground was falling out from under me. I demanded to know who had applied for this loan, but she could not give me that information over the phone. I would need to come in person with identification and file a fraud report. I called in sick to work and drove straight to the bank, my mind racing with possibilities. Deep down, I think I already knew who was responsible, but I did not want to believe it. When I got to the bank and saw the paperwork, my worst fears were confirmed. The signature was a decent forgery of mine, but more damning was the fact that whoever had applied knew details that only someone close to me would know: my mother's maiden name, the street I grew up on, even the name of my first pet. This was not some random identity theft. This was personal. I drove straight to Marcus's apartment, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles were white. When he answered the door, I could see in his eyes that he knew why I was there. I confronted him with the loan documents, and at first he tried to deny it, but when I pressed him, he broke down and admitted everything. He told me he had been gambling for months. First, just small bets on sports games, but then it escalated to online poker and eventually trips to the casino. He owed money to some dangerous people, and he was desperate. He said he only needed the loan temporarily, that he had a system to win back everything he owed, and then he would pay back the bank and give me a cut of the profits. He was crying as he told me this, begging me not to tell our parents, saying it would kill them to know the truth about their perfect son, but I could not let this slide. $50,000 was not pocket change, and my credit was now destroyed. I told Marcus he had 48 hours to figure out how to fix this mess, or I was going to have to tell Mom and Dad what he had done. I thought surely our parents would understand when they heard the truth. I thought they would be as outraged as I was that Marcus had stolen my identity and forged my name. I could not have been more wrong. When I sat down with my parents that Sunday and explained what Marcus had done, showing them the bank documents and explaining how he had used my personal information, their reaction was nothing like what I expected. Instead of anger at Marcus, they turned their fury on me. Dad accused me of trying to frame my own brother out of jealousy. Mom said I had always resented Marcus's success, and that this was a new low even for me. Marcus, meanwhile, put on the performance of his life. He denied everything, saying I was lying and that I must have taken out the loan myself and was now trying to blame him. When I showed them the signatures, he said I was crazy if I thought he would ever steal from family. He even managed to cry on cue, telling our parents how hurt he was that his own brother would make up such terrible lies about him. The worst part was watching my parents comfort Marcus while treating me like I was some kind of monster. Mom kept stroking his hair and telling him it was okay, that they knew I was just going through a difficult time. Dad told me I needed to get help for whatever psychological issues were causing me to lash out at my brother like this. What happened next still feels like a nightmare I cannot wake up from. Over the following weeks, Marcus did not just deny what he had done. He went on the offensive. He started telling our parents that I had been acting strangely for months, that I had anger issues, and that he was actually afraid of me. He said I had been making threats against him, and that he did not feel safe when I was around. But Marcus did not stop there. He created an elaborate web of lies designed to make me look like the villain in this story. He showed our parents text messages that he claimed were from me, messages filled with threats and angry rants. I knew I had never sent those messages, but the phone records showed they had come from my number. It was only much later that I learned how easy it is to spoof text messages if you know what you are doing. He told our parents that I had been stealing money from the family for years, taking cash from Mom's purse during Sunday dinners, and even forging checks from Dad's checkbook. When I vehemently denied these accusations, he produced what looked like canceled checks with my signature. Again, they were forgeries, but convincing ones. The situation with Jessica became another casualty of Marcus's campaign against me. He called her one evening while I was at work and told her that I had been lying to her about my financial situation. He said I was deep in debt from gambling and that I had been borrowing money from the family to cover my losses. He warned her that I was becoming increasingly unstable and that she should be careful around me. When Jessica confronted me about this, I tried to explain the truth, but Marcus had been so thorough in his lies that everything I said sounded like more deception. She asked me about the loan, and when I told her Marcus had taken it out using my identity, she said that sounded like exactly the kind of story someone would make up to cover their own gambling debts. The fact that I could not prove my innocence made everything worse. Our relationship began to crumble under the weight of Marcus's lies. Jessica started looking at me differently, questioning things I said, and pulling away emotionally. She would ask me questions about my finances, my family relationships, and my mental health in a way that made it clear she no longer trusted me. Within a month, she had moved out of our apartment, saying she needed space to figure things out. At work, rumors started spreading about my alleged financial problems and legal troubles. I never found out exactly how these rumors started, but I suspected Marcus had something to do with it. My boss called me into his office one day and asked me directly if I was having legal issues that might affect my ability to do my job. When I tried to explain the situation, he looked at me with the same skeptical expression I was getting from everyone else in my life. The isolation was overwhelming. Friends started avoiding my calls, family members treated me like I was toxic, and even casual acquaintances seemed to know something was wrong. It felt like Marcus had poisoned every relationship I had, and the worst part was that he was doing it all, while playing the role of the concerned younger brother who was just trying to help his troubled sibling. Every Sunday dinner became an interrogation. My parents would ask me about my finances, my mental health, and my relationship with Marcus. They spoke to me like I was a problem that needed to be managed rather than their son who was telling them the truth about being victimized by my brother. Meanwhile, Marcus would sit there looking sad and concerned, occasionally reaching over to pat my shoulder and tell our parents that he was sure I would get the help I needed. The final blow came during what would be our last family dinner together. I had decided that I was going to lay everything out one more time, presenting all the evidence I could gather about Marcus's deception. I brought bank statements, phone records, and even a letter from a handwriting expert who had analyzed the forged signatures. I was determined to make them see the truth, but Marcus was ready for me. Before I could even start presenting my evidence, he stood up from the dinner table with tears in his eyes and announced that he could not take it anymore. He said that living in fear of his own brother was destroying his mental health and that he had something he needed to confess. Then, in the most calculated move I have ever witnessed, Marcus lifted his shirt to reveal what looked like finger-shaped bruises on his ribs. He told our parents that I had attacked him 3 days earlier, when he refused to lie for me about the loan. He said I had grabbed him and shoved him against the wall, threatening to hurt him worse if he did not back up my story about the identity theft. I was so shocked I could not even speak. The bruises looked real, and Marcus was crying as he described this attack that had never happened. He said he had not wanted to tell anyone because he still loved me and hoped I would get help, but that he could not live in fear anymore. My parents believed him completely. Dad stood up from his chair and told me to get out of the house immediately. Mom was crying and hugging Marcus, telling him how sorry she was that I had hurt him. When I tried to deny it, tried to explain that Marcus was lying, Dad threatened to call the police if I did not leave right away. That was the moment my family officially disowned me. As I stood in the driveway of my childhood home, Dad told me that I was no longer welcome there. Mom said she could not have a son who would physically assault his own brother and lie about it afterwards. They said they would not contact me again until I got professional help and made amends for what I had done. The next few months were the darkest of my life. The stress of the situation caused my work performance to suffer, and eventually I was let go from my job. Jessica made it official and broke up with me, saying she could not be with someone she did not trust. The loan that Marcus had taken out in my name went into default, destroying my credit and making it nearly impossible to find a decent place to live. I ended up having to move to a different city entirely, partly to find work, and partly just to get away from all the people who looked at me like I was some kind of criminal. I found a small apartment in a neighborhood I could afford, and took whatever jobs I could get, waiting tables, doing data entry, even working nights at a warehouse. It was humbling and exhausting, but slowly I began to rebuild my life from nothing. Those 5 years were lonely, but they were also transformative. Without the constant drama and negativity of my family situation, I was able to focus on myself and my own goals. I taught myself computer programming online and eventually landed an entry-level job at a software company. I made new friends, including Tyler, a coworker who became one of the most genuine people I have ever known. Tyler never knew the details of why I had moved to the city, but he could tell I was someone who had been through something difficult. He never pushed me to share more than I was comfortable with, but he was always there when I needed someone to talk to. Having a friend who knew nothing about Marcus or my family drama was incredibly healing. That brings us back to last Tuesday when my phone rang, and I saw that familiar area code. I let it go to voicemail at first, but then curiosity got the better of me. When I listened to the message, I heard Marcus's voice for the first time in 5 years, and he sounded completely different from the confident, manipulative person I remembered. He was crying as he left the message, begging me to call him back because he needed my help. He said that Mom and Dad had finally learned the truth about everything he had done, and now they were in serious financial trouble because of him. He said he knew he had no right to ask for anything from me, but that he was desperate and did not know where else to turn. I sat in my apartment for hours, staring at my phone and trying to decide what to do. Part of me wanted to delete the message and pretend I had never heard it. After all, Marcus had destroyed my relationship with our parents, cost me my job, my girlfriend, and years of my life. Why should I care if he was finally facing consequences for his actions? But another part of me was curious about what had happened. How had our parents finally learned the truth? What kind of trouble were they in? And why was Marcus calling me? Instead of figuring it out himself, I decided to call Tyler and get his perspective. I had never told him the full story of what happened with my family, but I gave him the basic outline. My brother had framed me. For something he did, my parents had believed him over me, and I had been estranged from them ever since. Now my brother was asking for help, and I did not know what to do. Tyler listened without judgment, and then asked me a simple question that cut right to the heart of the matter. He said, "What do you need to happen for you to feel like this chapter of your life is finally closed?" That question hit me like a lightning bolt. I realized that for 5 years I had been carrying around this fantasy that someday my parents would realize the truth and apologize to me. I had imagined them showing up at my door, admitting they were wrong and begging for my forgiveness. But Tyler made me understand that I had been waiting for other people to give me closure instead of creating it for myself. I called Marcus back the next day. When he answered, he immediately started apologizing and crying, telling me how sorry he was for everything he had done. He said that his gambling addiction had spiraled completely out of control over the past 5 years, and he had ended up stealing money from our parents' retirement accounts to cover his debts. When they finally discovered what he had done, he had been forced to admit not just to the recent thefts, but to everything he had done to me years earlier. According to Marcus, our parents had lost nearly everything. Dad had to take out a second mortgage on the house, and they were both working part-time jobs to try to make ends meet. Mom had developed health problems from the stress, and they were struggling to pay for her medical care. Marcus said he had tried to fix things himself, but he owed money to too many people and could not get legitimate work because of his criminal record from recent arrests related to his gambling debts. He begged me to come home and help them figure out a solution. He said he knew he did not deserve my help, but that our parents did not deserve to suffer because of his mistakes. He promised that he would do whatever it took to make things right with me, including publicly admitting to everyone what he had done. I told Marcus I needed time to think about it, and I spent the next few days weighing my options. I talked to Tyler about it, and he helped me understand that this was not really about Marcus, or even about my parents. This was about me deciding what kind of person I wanted to be, and how I wanted to handle this opportunity to finally set the record straight. I decided that I would go back home, but not to rescue anyone. I would go back to have one final conversation with my family, to say what I needed to say, and then to walk away, knowing that I had done everything I could to create the closure I needed. I called Marcus back and told him I would drive home that weekend, but only if he agreed to tell our parents the complete truth about everything in my presence. He agreed immediately, probably because he was so desperate for my help. The drive back to my hometown felt surreal. I had not been on those familiar roads in 5 years, and seeing all the old landmarks brought back a flood of memories, both good and bad. When I pulled into the driveway of my childhood home, I was shocked by how much smaller and more run down it looked. The yard was overgrown, the paint was peeling, and Dad's old truck in the driveway looked like it was barely holding together. Mom answered the door, and I could see immediately that the years had not been kind to her. She looked much older than I expected, and there was a fragility about her that had not been there before. She started crying as soon as she saw me, and for a moment I thought she was going to hug me, but then she seemed to catch herself and step back. Dad appeared behind her, and he looked even worse. He had always been a big, strong man, but now he looked defeated and worn down. He could not meet my eyes when he said hello, and I could tell that he was struggling with shame and regret. Marcus was sitting at the kitchen table where we used to have our Sunday dinners, and he looked like a completely different person. The confident, manipulative younger brother I remembered had been replaced by someone who looked broken and desperate. His expensive clothes were gone, replaced by a wrinkled T-shirt and jeans. His face was gaunt, and his hands shook slightly as he gestured for me to sit down. For the next 2 hours, Marcus told our parents everything. He admitted to stealing my identity to get the loan, to forging the text messages and checks, to calling Jessica and poisoning her against me, and even to creating the fake bruises that had led to my final banishment from the family. He explained his gambling addiction, his mounting debts, and the desperation that had driven him to destroy his own brother's life to cover his tracks. Our parents listened in stunned silence. Mom cried quietly throughout most of Marcus's confession, and Dad just stared at the table like he could not believe what he was hearing. When Marcus finished, the room was silent for several long minutes. Finally, Dad looked up at me and said, "Cooper, I do not know how to begin to apologize for what we put you through. We failed you as parents, and I will regret that for the rest of my life." Mom reached across the table and tried to take my hand, but I gently pulled it away. She said, "We were so wrong about everything. We should have believed you. We should have protected you. Can you ever forgive us?" I looked at my parents, these people who had raised me and loved me, but had also cast me aside when I needed them most, and I felt something I had not expected: peace. Not forgiveness exactly, but a kind of acceptance that allowed me to let go of the anger I had been carrying for so long. I told them that I appreciated their apologies, but that forgiveness was going to take time. I explained that I had built a new life for myself, and while I did not hate them, I also could not pretend that the past 5 years had not happened. I said I was willing to help them figure out their financial situation, but not because we were family and not because I owed them anything. I was helping because it was the right thing to do. Over the next few hours, we went through their finances and came up with a plan. I connected them with a financial advisor I knew who specialized in helping people recover from major financial setbacks. I also gave them the contact information for a lawyer who could help them understand their options for dealing with Marcus's debts and any potential criminal charges he might face. As for Marcus, I told him that while I appreciated his confession, I was not ready to have a relationship with him. I said that his addiction was his responsibility to address, and that making amends to me would have to be part of his own recovery process, not something I was going to facilitate. When it was time to leave, Dad asked if I would consider moving back home to help them through this difficult time. I told him that my home was in the city where I had built my new life, but that I would stay in touch and continue to help them remotely as much as I could. Mom hugged me goodbye, and this time I did not pull away. She whispered in my ear that she loved me and was proud of the man I had become. Dad shook my hand and told me that even though they had lost the right to call me their son, he hoped that someday I might be willing to give them another chance to be the parents I deserved. As I drove away from that house for what I knew would probably be the last time, I felt something I had not experienced in years: freedom. Not the bitter, angry kind of freedom that comes from cutting toxic people out of your life, but the peaceful kind that comes from accepting what is and choosing to move forward without resentment. I called Tyler on my way home and told him about the visit. He said something that really stuck with me. "It sounds like you went home to save them, but you ended up saving yourself instead." He was right. For 5 years, I had been waiting for my family to give me the validation and closure I needed. But the truth is, closure is not something other people can give you. It is something you create for yourself by deciding to stop letting the past control your future. My parents and I exchange emails now every few weeks. They are working with the financial advisor and slowly getting their lives back on track. Marcus is in rehab, and from what I hear, he is finally taking his addiction seriously. I hope he gets better, not for my sake, but for his own. As for me, I have continued building the life I started when I moved to the city. I got promoted at work. I am dating someone wonderful who knows my whole story and loves me anyway. And I have a circle of friends who value me for who I am not, for who my family thinks I should be. Looking back on this whole experience, I have learned that sometimes the people who hurt us the most end up teaching us the most valuable lessons. Marcus taught me that I am stronger than I ever imagined, that I can survive betrayal and abandonment and still choose to be a good person. My parents taught me that love without trust and respect is not really love at all, and that I deserve better than conditional acceptance. Most importantly, I learned that you cannot wait for other people to write the ending to your story. You have to pick up the pen and write it yourself, and when you do, you get to choose whether it ends with bitterness or with peace. I chose peace, and that has made all the difference. I want to hear from all of you about this. Have you ever had to cut ties with family members who betrayed your trust? How did you find the strength to rebuild your life after losing people you thought would always be there for you? Share your stories in the comments below because many of you have faced similar situations, and your experiences could help someone else who is going through this right now. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life stories about overcoming betrayal and finding peace. Share this video with someone who might need to hear that it is possible to rebuild your life after losing everything. Thank you for listening to my story and for being part of this community where we can share our experiences without judgment. Remember that no matter what you are going through right now, you have the power to write your own ending. Make it a good one.